Hey guys, iKailaKai here, and welcome to the final match of the 3-on-3 Spring. This is going to be Lucci and my friend actually piloting the Lucci deck in the finals against a blue-purple Luffy. The blue-purple Luffy, of course, the best deck in the format by far, going against a deck that's been theorized to be one of the potential answers to this very purple Luffy dominant meta. I don't actually believe that this matchup is really Lucci favored, but I do think that it has some of the tools to be able to fight it decently. This is going to be a bit of an interesting match to see, and I hope that I can make the viewer experience a little bit better for you guys because I now have a pen. So I don't know exactly when I'm going to use this, but hopefully when I'm talking about some plays, maybe this will help you visualize some things a bit better. We also need to choose a winner for the giveaway that I had going on. I have all of the comments loaded up, so I'm just going to pick one up and display it nicely on the screen for you guys. Okay, the winner is SK, I think. Whether it's fun content, insights on different leaders, or competitive game commentary, I always come out learning something from your videos. Keep up the awesome content. Thank you. Thank you very much. That's all I can really say. I appreciate all of the support that you guys give me as well. But congratulations, SK, to winning this giveaway. Please DM me on Twitter because that's the easiest way to reach out for me. I'll verify that it's you. And if you can contact me within a week, then I will send these sleeves out to you. Con- congratulations on winning. Seeing the starting hands, I do not know if this is before or after the mulligan or not, and I don't know if the Blooper Blippi side is going first or second, but he only has one ramp card and it's 5 costs, which means that if he's going second, he can't actually use it on his 4 dong turn, obviously. But importantly, if he's going second, at the very least, he can play God Thread, and then on what should be his 8 dong, he's going to be at 9 dong, so he can play the cards in his hand. However, if he's going first and he only has one ramp card, he needs to have an 8 cost on the board to actually, or he needs to have an 8 cost in his hand to actually have a decent curve. If he doesn't find that he's going first, he could be in a very awkward spot. Lucci, on the other hand, has a very, very good curve. He has the important cards in the 4-cost Kazang as well as the 4-cost Laboon, and he also has his late-game bomb card in the 10-cost Kazang. By having these and getting them to stick, eventually it can be very difficult for Blue Purple Luffy to play out the game, but Blue Purple Luffy, of course, has some tools like the 8-cost Katakuri, the 8-cost Luffy, as well as things like Red Rock to be able to deal with some of this board. Let's see how this matchup goes. I've heard some things about this matchup being very weird. I don't know exactly how this matchup ends up going, so excited to watch it. Lucci is free to just play the Mancheri here because Blue Purple Luffy generally doesn't really have board clear, especially in the early game. Interestingly, Blue Purple Luffy decides not to attack here. And this is one of the options that Blue Purple Luffy can take, but I think it largely comes down to deck building. If Blue Purple Luffy runs the 8-cost Secret Rare Luffy from OP11, then you can actually take a very aggressive angle into Lucci because he doesn't have access to 8-cost Mori anymore. This means that Lucci's a lot more susceptible to aggro now. The fact that the Luffy player is not hitting suggests to me they might not actually run the 8-cost Luffy, which means that if they do try to go for a life race, the Luffy player might end up losing out. In which case, he might need to go for a longer game plan, clearing things like the Kuzang with God Thread and clearing 10-cost Kuzang with things like Red Rock to try to win out the late game with things like the 9-cost Sanji. I think that both these plans can be viable, but I think that the aggressive plan is a bit more consistent for Blue Purple Luffy, so we're going to have to see what ends up happening here. On this 6-dong turn, obviously there's something that Lucci can play on curve. Is there? He still hit at 5,000. I wonder what he plans to do with the rest of his dong. He activates the Mancheri, and I assume that he's going to pick up the 4-cost Kuzang and just replay it. Seems? Oh yeah, it seems so. Very nice. Obviously, he has the Laboon in his hand, and that is also a decent play. But this Kuzang, because it has the on-play that gives you a card, if you can find a timing to play it, helps give you a lot more advantage. Now, is this one card going to make a huge difference in the face of Pudding? No, but if he does not have his Pudding, then it makes a very large difference over time. Obviously, Luffy's in a bad spot right now because he doesn't have enough ramp to play his 9-cost on this turn because he's only at 8 dong on this turn. What is in his hand that he can do this turn? It's a kind of rough spot for him to be in. Obviously, he really wants to be able to develop 9-costs early on to try to force Lucci to clear them early, but Kuzan being on the board makes it very difficult to do that. And of course, not being at 9 Dong on this turn means that he can't do anything. The really threatening thing is that if you run the 8 cost Katakuri and you play it on this turn, it's almost guaranteed to die immediately without really doing anything. So sometimes even if you do have an 8 cost on this turn, you don't really want to play it, given that Kuzang is just sitting there threateningly. The Blooper Luffy player decides to go for a play that... interesting. Okay. I guess there is nothing else he can play, but I'm not even sure if you need to play the Bonkle. I guess it forces the opponent to remove it so he doesn't just get full reign to play whatever he wants. But it doesn't feel great when you could have been playing a 9 cost if you curved correctly. This is one of the dangers of Blue Purple Luffy, where if you just don't draw your curve, then you might not actually get what you need. Lucci, on the other hand, now at 8 Thong, basically he's just trying to get to a spot where he can safely play 10 cost Kazang. And right now, because the Blue Purple Luffy decided to play a slower game, not fighting the opponent's life, he has a lot of time to do so. Although the Lucci doesn't have Jack on this turn, which is what he would play optimally, he has basically every other card that he wants. So the plan right now would be to just fill up your trash where you can, set up, I would imagine you'd probably want to set up things like the Laboon as well as a blocker like Rebecca to just try to develop a powerful board that the Blue Purple Luffy can't deal with even with 9 Mom, like he ends up doing here. Blue Purple Luffy's in a really weird spot right now, where his board is exceptionally weak because he couldn't really do anything on what should have been a powerful turn last turn, and Lucci was able to securely set up things like the Kuzang and the Laboon to make it so that whatever the Luffy player ends up playing will get removed. I believe that the Luffy player had a 9 Sanji in his hand, so he can, at least because he sees 9 Mom in his top 5, get rid of one of the cards, but it doesn't actually solve the issue because next turn, one of them is going to -4 cost, the 10 cost Kazan is going to come out, and it's going to delete one of them. Although it only deletes one of the characters and relieves the other one on the board, because Blue Purple Luffy has given Lucci a lot of time, it doesn't feel like that much of an issue unless the Blue Purple Luffy can find Red Rock quickly. He plays the 9 cost Sanji to play out the 9 cost Mom. It seems like by doing it in this sequence, he's planning to not attack again, which I think if you've committed to this plan, then the idea is that you don't hit them and hope that they just don't draw 10 cost Kuzang. However, unfortunately for him, Aru had 10 cost Kuzang in his starting hand. So, regardless of hitting him or not, it does not make a difference if he finds that 10 cost Kuzang. He's debating on which one to send to life, and I actually had this issue too, but I think that you end up sending the Kuzang? Oh, he sends the Laboon. I feel like you send Kuzan to life just because he can actually become an attacker while also minusing, whereas Laboon, if he wants to minus, then he has to rest himself. Ada does not even have to think about his turn. He already knows he's going to play the 10 cost Kuzan. Swings 5,000 into leader. Obviously, Luffy is a 6,000 power leader, but you can still hit 5,000 into 6,000. It's just that no combat will actually resolve. And also, because this Kuzan is sitting behind the 4 cost Rebecca, it is a little bit more safe even if it rests itself. Likely not going to survive until the next turn, but still has the chance to do so if Lucci decides to protect it very hard. I don't think he necessarily needs to because he also has things like the 4 cost Shirahoshi, and also he has the 4 cost Rebecca in his hand to be able to call back cards from his trash as well. But I think that, honestly, the Lucci player can do anything right now and he's going to still be ahead because Blue Purple Luffy had a bit of a slow start. Odd though, maybe there's a difference between a good player and a bad player, because I would have just slammed down 10 Gus Kazang without thinking, but he's taking his time on this turn to think a little bit about his options. What other options does he have? He has minus one of the cards by 1. He can Kazang again to -5, so it's at 4 cost. Then he can play... Okay, he decides to go for the Kazang play anyways. But I guess if you were to weave in things like Rebecca, as well as some sort of cost reduction through things like the Shirahoshi, maybe you can find some other plays. I do think that developing this 10 cost Kuzang on the board right now is a lot more threatening because it forces Luffy to deal with it. If he decides to try to do what he did last turn and just keep playing 9 costs, then it's very easy for Lucci to keep dealing with them because they're not 9 costs, they're 4 costs. I think regardless of what the Luffy player wants to pick up, the rest of the cards have to go to the bottom if he runs Red Rock, because he needs to look for this Red Rock very quickly. If he doesn't find the Red Rock soon, then this Kuzang's just going to keep getting advantage over time, especially because Blue Purple Luffy has given time to Lucci by not hitting him. Yeah. Starts with a 7,000 attack into Kuzang because this way, If he decides to go for the safe plan of not hitting again, then he doesn't need to rest his characters and force Lucci to have to clear them directly on the board. Unfortunately, this is much easier done than said, honestly, because he has Tenkas Kazan on the board. This time cost Luffy, I believe he's just going to play for the one draw and then end up passing the way that he's playing. Luffy still has a ton of resource in his hand and in his life, so he does have a lot of time to be able to play the long game out, but at some point he will run out of big things to play onto the board. So right now, he's either looking for Red Rock, or he's looking for another Sanji to be able to spread out his board very quickly. Nonetheless, though, both of these players are still in a really healthy spot, and it doesn't feel like any of them is really in the advantage in terms of the card advantage or life advantage, but on the board, despite Luffy having two massive characters, it still feels like Lucci is ahead because of how powerful this Tenkasukuzan is once it sticks. Well, what can you do on this turn? Honestly, there's a lot of things you can do on this turn. Having the freedom to be able to use the forecast Shiraoshi as effectively a Rebecca and Hina stick together in one card makes it very easy to run in a lot of these sorts of new age Lucci decks. He can hit with his leader for 5 or 6,000 or whatever to drop 2 cards into his trash to be at 9. Then when he uses Tempest Kick, he's going to make it 10, which means that he can get the -3 something, get the draw obviously. He can play the forecast Shiraoshi to board, -4 to something, and then he can play the Lucci from his hand. And, I mean, honestly, that's pretty devastating to me. We'll see what he ends up going for. He starts this turn by hitting with his Lucci at 5,000 power. Interestingly, he does actually have enough dong to hit at 6,000 if he goes for that play, so we'll have to see what he ends up going for. But maybe he's electing purposefully to try not to let the Blooper Luffy take his life, because potentially this could give him things like Red Rock, this could give him things like 9-cost Sanji. Maybe the Lucci player is also trying to take it to a longer game. So in a very interesting spot where both of these players are trying to outlast the opponent. Lucci going for something different from what I said before. Maybe he wants to hold on to the Tempest Kick for a timing that is a bit more tricky to find these thresholds, but because he has the extra dong that he can use, he doesn't want to waste it on Tempest Kick just yet, and is trying to hold on to it for later, potentially. Still, he ends up doing the same thing where he does a -3 just from the soldier. Shiraoshi into Lucci, it's just he didn't end up using Tempest Kick. But this is the thing. Once Tenkas Kazan sticks onto the board, it's really, really easy to clear the board, even if you don't have things like Moria in the deck anymore. And this is why Lucci as a deck has been coming back, especially in OP11, where these massive bodies in decks don't have any removal attached to them. He sees the 9-cost Sanji, but he does not see any very good targets. So what you usually do in these situations is, yeah, you send it to the bottom, and you play something from your hand and hold on to the Sanji for next turn. Forcing Sanji on this turn to play something weak doesn't necessarily get you any closer to lethal. You need to have a good Sanji turn against decks like Lucci. Obviously, if it's something like the Mirror, where you just really want to develop bodies on the board, then I think that playing something like the 9-cost Sanji into the 4-cost Banklei that we saw is a decent option, because the Banklei is forcing the opponent to deal with it, and also could potentially attack with up to 10,000 power base on the turn following, depending on what the opponent has developed. So not a bad play in the Mirror, but in this sort of matchup, given that it's automatically going to be -1 cost on the board, it's not something that we want to play just yet. There are several threats on the board right now, but thankfully none of them are named Laboon or Kuzan. Well, 4-cost Kuzan at least. There is a massive Kuzan on the board that we do have to deal with. But it gives Blue Purple Luffy a little bit of breathing room in that he's not forced to necessarily play the 9-cost Mom this turn. He rests 5 dong. Does he have Nami? Okay, he does have Nami. Does he have another one, though? If he can play double Nami, it's something. With 10-cost Kuzan, it's a bit rough, but I think that the main thing that he's going for right now is to just look through his deck for something like Red Rock, which I hope that he runs. Honestly, I've not seen his deck list, so he might just not run it. What does he see from his hand? He sees another 9-cost Sanji, is that? Or is that the other one before? Decides to go for board clear here. I think this is fair, but he's not in a great spot. Decides to rest the Rebecca and hit into the Rebecca, again going for this really, really slow plan. I think at this point the Blooper Luffy is forced to commit to it. Pivoting now into hitting the opponent is only going to make it a lot worse, especially given that the Blooper Luffy has not drawn or seen pudding, assuming that he runs it. But if he decides to pivot his plan now, it only gives the Lucci player more resources to play with, so he needs to commit to this plan and hope that he can draw into some answer to Kuzang. I think it's very interesting that Kuzang also didn't, or the Lucci player, did not attack with their Kuzang last turn as well. Both these players are really trying to take the game slowly and not let the opponent draw the cards that they want to draw from their life. Although it's a very small advantage letting the opponent draw one extra card, if you just want time, there's no reason to attack the opponent's life. Conversely, if you're trying to speed up the game, that's when you attack life. So if both of these leaders right now are not trying to force the opponent to use resources via defending their life, there's really no reason to hit the life at all. Given that Lucci somehow is at 6 life and blue-purple Luffy is at 4 life, it's going to be a while until the life counts actually start to matter in this game. We finally see the Jack from Lucci. If Lucci can set up Jack alongside Kuzang, alongside his leader ability, he can very easily clear a 9 cost every single turn. And if he can set up this board state, blue-purple Luffy, even if he finds Red Rock, is in a bit of a doomed scenario. Picks up the Jack, and then now he just needs to figure out something to do with the rest of his Dong. Next turn, you can play the Jack and start to just clear everything that the blue-purple Luffy plays from here on out. This 10 cost Kuzan makes everything really easy to clear. So, Lucci again choosing not to hit the opponent's leader, trying to kind of choke him out of the game. And it really seems, given these searches, that the blue-purple Luffy player probably doesn't run the 4 cost pudding, nor the 8 cost Luffy, which is the main reason for why he's probably playing in this way. But yeah, I guess if you have neither of those 2 cards in your deck, you really just don't want to hit Lucci. Nonetheless, though, he does have 2 9 Sanjis in his hand, and he sees the 9 cost Luffy, so he can pick up any of the cards with counter, set up to play 9 cost Luffy off of the 9 cost Sanji. But because the opponent's at 6 life, the rush really doesn't matter. It's a very awkward spot. I think that the blue-purple Luffy player, I don't necessarily think that his game plan was incorrect, but I think that the Lucci player managing to draw the 10 cost Kuzang has really thrown it in a bad direction. The main reason why you wouldn't hit the opponent's leader is to make it so the opponent has a much harder time finding their top end, and unfortunately Lucci was able to find the key cards that he needs naturally, and what does he do with the rest of his cards here? It feels bad to play 9 cost Luffy or 9 cost Sanji into 9 cost Luffy, so he might end up sending it to the bottom, but I feel like you just want to play it anyways, just because it'll help you cycle through your deck. It'll make a board that Lucci at least needs to deal with temporarily, and at the very least, because the 9 cost Luffy gives him 1 draw, it helps him draw into a little bit more counter and set up his top 5 for a new, fresh look at 4 new cards. You put it to the top, so it looks like he's going to go for that plan. But because he's not going for an aggressive angle on the opponent's leader, the rush on Luffy doesn't actually matter too much. So this is, again, just effectively, in Lucci's eyes, a 4 cost 10,000 that draws you 1 card on play. Very good on paper, but against Lucci, it doesn't matter if it can't attack. Oof. And now, Lucci, with the Jack that we've already seen, will likely just be able to set up the board and start taking aggressive angle on the opponent's leader. He's set up the cards that he needs, and now he just needs to put on enough pressure onto blue-purple Luffy so that he doesn't have enough time to stabilize the board. I believe this is the plan that he'll probably end up going for, but we'll see if he decides to have the green light to go aggressively on the opponent's leader now. Interestingly, I don't know if this has been pointed out already, or if people have noticed, but oh, okay, the casters are just talking about it, so maybe it just happened. Right now, the red side is the Lucci's team. One of his teammates has won their games, and one of their teammates has lost their game, which means that this is going to be the deciding match of this game. The nerves of being at this point can be really, really scary. And my friend here, Ada, he's been on stream twice before this point, and he's lost both times. He has a 0% win rate on official streams. He has this bit of a curse where he always loses round 1, and he always loses on stream. Sorry, I was rambling so much, I did not even realize what happened. The Lucci player used Tempest Kick to make the 9-cost Luffy 1 cost and hit with Brook to make it 0 and KO it. Which means that with the remaining Dong, he's going to be able to clear both of the characters on the field. I don't think that Blue Bravely can really recover from this situation. Even if he found his Red Rock on curve, his hand just isn't good enough. Jesus Christ, how many cards does he have in his hand? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I mean, maybe he has enough time to be able to survive for a while. I'm surprised that you even take that 6,000 attack if you have this many cards in your hand. But I guess he's really, really looking for something like Red Rock. But honestly, once Jack comes down, it might just be too late. You've lost 2 of your 9-cost Sanjis plus a 9-cost. The opponent's been able to clear your board and pressure your life. He still decides to take this 7,000 attack. This encourages Oda to go for a 10,000 attack, because either the opponent is forced to take another life, go to 14 cards, which is probably the first time we've ever seen that many cards in your hand, or he's forced to do a really inefficient counter. Obviously, that he took the 7,000 attack means that he's for sure going to take this next one, and because Lucci can't run things like the 4-cost pudding, I understand his logic in doing so. He doesn't need to defend these attacks because he just needs to defend the one that's going to kill him. But I mean, given the board state, I think that the Blue Purple Luffy just wants time. But by going down to 1 life here, the Lucci player can start with threatening the 10-cost Kuzang's 10,000 power attack very early on to make it much more difficult for the opponent to actually handle the board and also handle defending their life. Oof. Blue Purple Luffy gets the turn back, again with no board, and Lucci's board only getting stronger. At the very least, he has 14 cards going into this turn, as he's going to have 16 cards later. I think it's just too late for Blue Purple Luffy to do anything. There are 2 blockers on the board, which means that it's very hard for him to take back the Kuzang or the Jack through combat as well. Oda's just had a stronghold on this entire game from start to finish. This is exactly how you should be playing Lucci. He didn't rest his Kuzang at timings where he potentially could have had it taken back by something like the 3-cost Usohachi into a massive swing. He always made sure to prioritize the safety of his Kuzang, making so the opponent could only clear it through Red Rock. Caster seemed to be talking about Red Rock as well. I don't know if he was able to draw it, but if he did draw it, then it makes the situation a little bit better. But given that his board just hasn't been able to stick, very, very tricky to deal with. 8,000 into Lucci. I think that you're free to just block this attack if you want to take a more aggressive angle, but I'd understand if you wanted to just let the attack through as well to prioritize defending his Kuzang. I believe that even if you were to block this attack with Shiraoshi, if the opponent decides to do something weird like play Usohachi and put all of the Dong on Nami to try to kill something like the Jack or the Kuzang, he's not in a stable enough spot that he can actually end up winning the game out from there, even if he managed to clear one of the characters on Lucci's board. However, because Lucci has 4 2Ks and 2 1Ks in his hand, regardless of how he plays out the situation, he should be able to defend whatever is played onto the board. I think it's just how much he decides to value the blocker versus the attack, which is what he's thinking about right now. But I think that he can safely block this if he's concerned about defending his board in the next coming turns. What he decides to do, I think either of these plays is reasonable, so let's see what the Lucci Pro decides to do here. He decides to let the attack through, prioritizing the defensive capabilities of Jack and Kuzang. And now Blue Purple Luffy, oh, it seems like he was able to draw the Red Rock, finally, honestly. And now if he's able to stabilize next turn with the 9-cost Sanji and something and get at least one of them to stick, maybe he can start to get back some of the advantage. But the issue here is that one of the merits of not hitting the opponent's leader is that the opponent's hand gets smaller and smaller, but because he hasn't really been able to find an aggressive angle on the opponent's leader, and the Lucci player here hasn't really been cutting counter to defend his board at all effectively, Lucci's hand is still quite healthy, meaning that if the Blue Purple Luffy wants to be able to actually win back this game, he's going to need much, much more than 5 minutes. Now, in Japan, the overtime rule is that, first of all, you don't get any sort of overtime time. you just get extra turns. The player going first gets 2 extra turns. Oh, sorry, 1 extra turn, not including the current turn, and the player going second gets 2 extra turns. So I think that we're just in a situation where Blue Purple Luffy wasn't able to find an angle on Lucci the entire game, which makes it look like he was playing incorrectly. But I think that given the way that he's most likely building his deck list, this is probably the only way that he can play out this matchup. Although it looks really weird, I think that this is the only thing that he could have done. Now, if I look at his deck list and I see something like 8-cost Luffy and at least 2 copies of 4-cost Pudding, I'm going to start scratching my head, not understanding what he did here. But I understand the way that he's playing. It's just unfortunate that despite not hitting Lucci, Lucci was still able to draw the key pieces that he needed throughout this game. Interestingly, again, Lucci decides to go for a more safe play by not actually hitting the opponent's leader, but just trying to prioritize clearing the board. Plays Tsuda, plays his second Jack, to be able to clear both of the bodies on the board to try to make sure that Blue Purple Luffy just never has an avenue back into this game. By not blocking the turn before, he still has 2 blockers on the board and 2 Jacks on the board, meaning that even if he doesn't actually KO something, he can easily cycle his hand and or hit the opponent's leader to try to pressure resources out of the opponent's hand as well. Blue Purple Luffy still in a spot where he has like 15 cards in his hand, which is completely absurd, but he doesn't have the board to support it. Really, really rough spot for Blue Purple Luffy, and for people who dislike Lucci and dislike Luffy, I don't really know what to tell you, but this is the finals match that we have. It's all dependent on here, and unfortunately, we've just been watching a funeral for Blue Purple Luffy for the past 30 minutes. Blue Purple Luffy looking at what could be his final leader ability, and oh, okay, I completely understand how he's playing now. He runs 2 Red Rocks. Most decks, if they run Red Rock, which not necessarily all of them do, only run 1. The fact that this deck ran 2 Red Rocks means that he was really, really playing around that card, and he just failed to draw it. If he was able to draw his Red Rock early on, get rid of the Kuzang on curve, and be able to get rid of the Jack or a potential second Kuzang when it came out, then he could very likely have stabilized this game. Okay, that makes a lot more sense. That's just really rough, I think. I think that at 1 copy, going for this play is very, very risky because you might just not draw that 1 copy, but at 2, given your leader ability being able to search the card as well, it makes it very likely for you to actually find this card early on at 2 copies. So I think it's honestly just kind of unlucky that Blue Purple Luffy wasn't able to find his cards. I mean, Blue Purple Luffy's not letting it show on his face, but I would be miserable if this was my game plan. I did this in front of thousands of people and just never hit the opponent's leader. However, I mean, he still does have a massive amount of counter. If we were to look at this game from a standpoint not looking at the clock, I think that Blue Purple Luffy still could have a decent avenue back into this game. Given that the Kuzan does not, the Lucci doesn't play another Kuzan. Just by the fact that eventually Blue Purple Luffy will be able to stabilize his board and clear the opponent's board through the red rocks that he has. But given the amount of time that it took for him to find... What else is that in his hand? Okay, for a second I thought that that event was another red rock. If you look at the size of his deck too, he's looked through so much of his deck to finally find the 2 red rocks that he had in his deck. It's just far too little too late at this point. Because obviously on this turn, if he wants to go for a longer game, he can red rock the Kuzang and try to stabilize the board from there. But given that the opponent was able to find this second Kuzang and be able to clear the opponent's 9 cost, it's going to be very, very difficult for Blue Purple Luffy to ever find a point where he can stabilize this game. This is where Lucci really shines, is if he can manage to set up the 10 cost Kuzang, because so many decks in this meta don't actually have a way of dealing with 10 cost Kuzang. Green Purple Luffy, Purple Luffy, Blue Purple Luffy, Bello Betty, Red Zoro, none of these decks can actually deal with high costs, so all Lucci has to do is survive until he gets to that point, and he can eventually beat these decks out. The one deck that he really, really does not want to hit into is, of course, Teach. I also think that despite me talking about this game really looking extremely Lucci favored, this matchup is Blooper Luffy favored. If Blooper Luffy can successfully ramp in the beginning, start playing his 9 Sanjis early, and either overrun Lucci before he can stabilize the board state, or outsurvive Lucci with Red Rock, then he can win this matchup. But Lucci, being that deck that can beat all of the other decks that are not Blue Purple Luffy, aside from Teach, of course, and also the deck that can at least reasonably beat Blue Purple Luffy 40% of the time, makes it a very decent deck, especially in these 3v3 tournaments. If it wasn't a 3v3 tournament, I think that the value of this deck would go down a lot more because you're bringing a deck that's weak into what's the best deck in the format. But of course, as we saw from this game, it's nothing that's not insurmountable. Unfortunately, if the Blue Purple Luffy player had more time, he might actually be able to make something of this game because the Lucci player's hand is finally going down in size. But he really, really wanted to be able to do something like this 15 minutes ago. Got the Laboon. So now with the Laboon's -4. Oh, he's going for the attack on leader. Very interesting. So if he were to play the Laboon, get the -4 onto Sanji, the -1 from leader, that gives him 5. He needs one more. Does he not have the one? If he plays Rebecca, he has it. He's trying to speed up the game a little bit. I think, honestly, given the clock, none of this really matters. But he's trying to set up a situation where he has, again, like he had before, 2 blockers on the board to make it very difficult for the opponent to take back his board. And even though the Sanji survived, given the amount of blockers on his board, and that we've already seen 2 Usohachi played to the field, although he was able to draw another one just now, it makes it very, very hard to take back the opponent's board. And now Lucci just wants to put Blue Purple Luffy on a timer. I don't know if the overtime rules are slightly different when you're on stream, because losing to overtime... Oh, okay. We don't need to answer that question now, though, because the Blue Purple Luffy has conceded. Very weird matchup. Very, very weird matchup. Congratulations to Are and Winda and the person in the middle who I'm not exactly sure who he is, but really, really good showing from them. We were able to see both of my friends on the stream, so that was fun for me. And I felt a little bit bad for the Blue Purple Luffy player, despite teching his deck well for the game plan that he went for, not being able to draw the cards that he needed. Thank you guys for watching this video. Make sure to like, subscribe if you haven't already. I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.